The stories on these videotapes are told by Felix White Sr., a Winnebago, Nebraska resident who is knowledgeable about traditional Winnebago Indian culture. These stories were told to him as a boy in his home, just as they had been recounted to generations before him, and will also be told to future generations. Stories are an informal means of educating Winnebago children and adults, and are often in the form of a warning about the consequences of unacceptable behavior.
It seemed that when the sun would go down, the word of caution was that it's time to settle down. The day was created for activity. Nighttime was for rest. So when the ruler of the day, which was the sun, would set and nightfall fell, one must come to rest, like most nature, except the night-prowling animals and those insects that traveled at night. So man must abide by these rules. They didn't say little children, but their manner of teaching was that nighttime things, accidents can happen because you don't see so well in the dark, and you might forget that there was a stump in a certain part of a yard and you're out playing around and you stumble over the stump, might hurt yourself more than just skinning your shins. And in order to enforce that, then they concocted the idea that there were evil spirits that lurked in darkness. And those that disobeyed these rules of coming to rest might face some other consequences if they happen to be around where there were these evil spirits. In a way, that was part of the discipline, or it was the beginning of teaching the individual self-discipline to do that thing which a youngster would say, oh, gee, today, if they said, well, now sun's set now, no more running around, you can't go out. And of course, we'd have everybody, little tykes would say, oh, gee, Mom, I could see out there, the street light is on. We'd say today, but in those days, we didn't have street lights. And so we would have to come in the house and sit down. And so this gave the elders a chance to put their input in training, educating the young. And so it was done by this method of telling legends, stories, the experiences of other people who have gone on and left the stories or the experiences related to their relatives. And these stories are handed down by the family or a sort of a professional storyteller who enjoyed his job of visiting people in the village.
Washtunkoga, the first son of Mauna, the earth maker, is often called the trickster, or the foolish one. Although he was sent by Mauna to help those who walk on two legs, men, who were being tormented by monsters, he never accomplished his goal because he was always involved in some kind of mischief. In this story, Trickster foolishly jumps to a wrong conclusion, partly because of his great pride and partly because of his great appetite, both of which are his trademarks.
been in the Northland somewhere, and he headed back towards Winnebago land. And as he came south, why, he recognized some of the landmarks. Now, he said, I'm getting pretty close to home, and this was in the morning. He didn't say whether he arose early in the morning or what, but he had been on the move. So now this is morning, and he thought to himself, about noon, when they have the lunch all made, I'll be there so I can come in on it. I'll get a free one. So he hurried along, and there's one more hill, and he began to climb. So moving rather fastly, why, climbing up the north side of this big high hill, and it's a little bit steeper on the north, because in nature, somehow or another, the storms, rains, snows melt away on the south slopes, and so most of the south slopes of these hills have a gentler incline. But the north side, most generally, always is pretty steep. So he's climbing the north side, and climbing up, it takes a lot of energy. And then on the way up, he thought, well, he heard drums. He thought to himself, the scouts done a good job that time. He said they were out watching, and they saw me coming and notified the people. Now they're glad I'm coming home, and they are having a dance to celebrate my homecoming. And as he neared the top, sure enough, these drums kept getting louder and louder, and they went somewhat thump, 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 thump. Well, there's certain rhythm to certain dances, and this is it. Sure enough, he said, they are having a dance. About this time, he got to the top of the hill, and he looked over the other side, and it was high noon. And he looked down the hillside over there, and sure enough, there was many people down there in their colored feathers, all out there dancing. So he waited a little bit and thought, well, then I'll shout to them and let them know that I appreciate what they're doing for me. And so he waited a while and caught his breath, but it still, the drums kept going, so he said, "Oh, hey!" But they didn't pay any attention to him. They just kept on going. Huh. I'll try again. So he hollered out there like you're hollering at somebody in the distance. And they paid no attention to him. On several occasions, usually they said 4 times, they do something to repeat it. So this last time he said, "Ha ha, I know." He said, "Now they've changed it to a dancing contest." So he said, if they want to see a good dancer, maybe they're teasing me. Well, I'll just dance with them. I'll have a contest with them. And I'll out-dance every one of them. Towards evening, the breeze stopped blowing, and he just kept on dancing, thinking that, well, he's showing them how good a dancer he was. Well, when he stopped, he looked down the hill there, and everybody was standing still. There's no breeze on top of the hill. Ha! He says, now, he said, they've seen a dancer. So they felt ashamed about what they were doing. Now they saw a good dancer, so they quit. Now I'll go down and receive their congratulations. So he picked up his little box and his coonskin bedroll, and he goes down to where these people were. was shocking to him, I guess, to find that the dancers that he thought he saw dancing was the SUMAC trees. Their bright red and yellow leaves, which was waving in a breeze. Where was the drums? So what was happening was that he's climbing this hill, exerting all his energy to climb that hill, and that sets up a rapid heartbeat, and then sometimes you can exert yourself to the point that you can hear the heartbeat in your head, in your ears, within himself. The thump, 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 thump. So he continued this thump, thump by joining in with the SUMACs and dancing with them all afternoon. And so he thought a while, he says to himself, no wonder the people call me the foolish one. This Waktankaga also means he's foolish, not to be trusted. You can doubt his truthfulness. He'll always be tricking you.
The trickster stories demonstrate both the serious and the comic sides of life. Washtunkaga helps to show the important values of Winnebago culture through adventures that are usually like the SUMAC story in segment number 2, humorous. He helps us to laugh at ourselves while learning how to behave compatibly. In this story, Trickster still feels foolish about the SUMAC when he comes to a small lake to rest. Again, he jumps to a wrong conclusion because he is too proud and foolish. Humility is an important virtue in Winnebago culture.
And it's still daylight, so he walks to the edge of the little lake there and begin to look that lake over. And he looked across, and there he saw a guy pointing, So he hollered at him, and the guy wouldn't quit pointing. So I just stood out there and pointing at something. So he turned around and he looked all over to see what the guy was pointing at, and there was nothing spectacular out there to hold his attention, so he comes back at the guy and hollers at him again. Hey! The guy didn't pay attention to him. He just stood there and still pointing. Of course, I imagine he looked across there and got his focus on that guy by putting his hand up there, shielding his eyes from that light that's shining there. And when he hollered at him, he didn't move at all. So the guy's a wise guy, he said, and he thinks he's the only guy around, I guess, so I'm nothing. Oh, I know what he's trying to do. He's trying to have a contest with me, so I'll do that too. So there he said, I can point. He said, I'll point you anytime. So there he stood. Boy, his arm got tired after a while, but he said, oh. With a wry face, he just kept holding that arm up there. Finally, the sun went down, and well, it got dark, so I don't think he's going to stand over there and point all night, so I'll take mine down. He said, I can't see him. Surely he can't see me. Well, he said, it's too dark to travel. I'll just camp right here. So next morning he gets up and he looked across there in the early morning. He saw this guy pointing again. He said, I'm going to go over there and see who he is. I'll stand right alongside of him and point too, if he wants to still have a contest. So he walked around the lake. And he got over there, it's remains of an old tree in that area that had a little forest fire one time on that side of the lake, and that trunk of the tree was up there with one branch that looked like a man standing over there pointing from where he saw him. So, again, he says, I know now why they call me the foolish one. There you go again, jumping to conclusions.
Trickster is a powerful being, since he is Mauna's son, but sometimes he forgets his power. Washtunkaga is occasionally very clever, but usually follows his cleverness with foolishness. He is clever when tricking unsuspecting creatures for his own pleasure or to gain revenge. In this story, he cleverly captures many birds to roast in order to fill his gluttonous appetite, but loses them because he is foolish, selfish, and proud. He forgets the importance of sharing and humility to Winnebago culture.
You see, in the fall of the year, or maybe not, the spring of the year, whenever it was, but the lake had a lot of ducks and geese on it. And another thing about my friend here, this Washtunkaga, he had a big appetite. And once he gets started to eat, he could sit and eat and eat and eat. So he had devised a plan to have a nice dinner. So he built a framework of poles, and he gathered some of the rushes along the water's edge and made a covering out of that and covered this framework. And so the birds came over and said, "Big brother, what are you doing?" "Oh," he said, "I have a whole bag of songs back there." He said, "I was going to get this thing covered and sit in here and sing." "Well, can we come and listen to you?" "Sure," he said, "and in fact, I want you to dance when I sing." "Oh, that'll be fine." So he enticed the birds to file into this lodge, and he sat in a doorway after he got him inside. And first he said, "We have to dance with your eyes closed." So just to caution you, he said, anybody tries to peek or anything until the song is ended, he's going to have red eyes. Well, they danced around in there, and he's sitting there singing. And I'm not in that musical department right now, so I won't sing that song. So he give them their song, and so now he said, "Now this is a livelier dance, and you should squawk once in a while, you know. And you geese should honk once in a while." I said, "Why? The other brothers, when they dance, they give out war whoops once in a while and so forth. So you must do that." So when I was doing this dance, that he was observing the fat ones as they waddled by. Why, he'd reach out and twist their necks, and he's going to have himself a nice big dinner. So about that time they were making that funny kind of a squawk, so I think that teal was back there. So he peeked a little bit, and just then, he seen Washtunkaga grab a big fat goose or something and twist its neck, and he let out the alarm and said, he's tricking us, he's killing us. And so the rest of them opened their eyes. About that time, he quit singing, see, and he was getting by until that teal peaked. And so it is said today that the teal has a red eye. And if that's so, it's been ever since that dance that the teal was in the lodge. So now here he's going to satisfy his appetite, so he built a big fire. So he waited at the proper time that they were nicely done, and he digs one out and sits down to begin his meal. But just about that time, he started taking a bite. There was a couple of trees over here, and the branches would move, and they just rub against one another, and it just squeak. Now, Wakatankaga didn't want to be disturbed when he was eating, or he wouldn't enjoy his meal, so he scolds the tree. So you stop that. Don't disturb me while I'm trying to have my meal. Stop. So about the time he's going to take another bite, or try to take a bite, the tree would squeak again. The branches are rubbing. Oh, as usual, he waited till it did it 4 times, and then he put his meat down. He said, I'm coming up to take care of you. So he got up there and he grabbed those big branches and trying to pull them apart or do something to them in his human strength. And about that time, the wind blew again and got his hands caught in the branches, and there he was. He couldn't get his hands out. And he's mumbling to himself that he got himself trapped. And he's scolding the trees. And he said, turn me loose. Well, once again, the trees begin to answer him. Now, this went on for about 4 times. He was telling that tree to turn him loose, and the tree said, well, brother, we can't do anything of our own. We have to stand in one place all our lives, give you people shade, places for the birds to nest. This is our duty. We don't do anything. We don't move until somebody else moves us. Just then a group of wolves were coming by, and if he'd have kept still, it'd been fine. But he said, hey, brothers. The lead wolf looks up there, and oh, he said, that's the trickster up there. He said, oh, I wonder what he's up to. Then what are you doing over there? He said, can we help you? No, get out of here. He said, don't come this way. Especially don't go over this way. So they reasoned with themselves. He don't want us over there. He must have something over there. So they went over there and found his big cookout there. So they sat down and ate his birds up, ate his dinner, and went on their wolfish way. About that time, Wakachankaga, he's quite upset about things, and with his own strength, his decision, I'm going to get out of this. So he pulled his hands free. He said, I should have done this a long time ago. Waiting for that tree to do this. Sort of slapped the limbs and said, why didn't you obey me? He said, we move only when the wind blows or moves us. He said, you have all the powers that anyone wants if you would use it when you want something done. But big brother, you forget so much.
Why is the turkey buzzard so ugly? Washtankaga is a vengeful being and occasionally uses his cleverness and power to gain revenge, as he does in this story. Trickster and the Buzzard again illustrates the great danger of having too much pride. Trickster and the Buzzard both get the treatment their haughtiness deserves. George Crow tells this story in Hollow of Echoes to remind his grandchildren to be humble, sharing Winnebagos. After his last adventure, Trickster is exhausted and decides to rest in the shade. In the sky, he sees the beautiful buzzard soaring on an updraft.
Imagine himself, he was that high, he could see a great part of this wonderful world. Without any effort, he could just see way over there, way over this way, you know, where he looked, clear to the horizon. Well, in the meantime, the bird thought, well, I better go down and take a little closer look at what this is. There might be a nice meal there. So it happened this bird was a kind of a bird that looks for dead animals, we call carrion. This happened way back there in the early days when everything was beautiful. And so he was made to be a beautiful bird. And as he came closer, he observed that the thing that he had seen from way up there was also observing him, and sort of tried to cover up his first intent. Well, he thought, well, I'll just find this tree over here close by and get in this tree here and sort of pretend that I just came down to take a rest. So Washtankaga, watching this bird do exactly what he had planned, was he lived in a tree pretty close to where Washtankaga's resting place was, and stood up there and was preening himself. The feathers on his neck would turn all kinds of colors, and every little movement, some would be purple, sometimes turn green, reddish, blue, which caused Washtankaga to open up the conversation. Say, little brother, he said, you are a wonderful bird. He said, very pretty, handsome. Yes, sir. You got it made, and one never had it so good. All that because this bird could really control himself up there in the high altitudes, or was a master at using the up currents that goes on, warm air rising. He could get into one of those things and scoot right up into a high altitude in no time. So, brother, what brings you down here? And so this bird was a proud bird too. You know, he just kind of shrugged himself a little bit and shook his head and moving side from side and changing position just to get more words of praise out of this one that's laying under the tree. Because he was almost human. And so then this bird answered him and said, why do you praise me so? Well, said Washtankaga, he said, I just witnessing you way up there, what you do and how beautiful you are, it just seems to appear to me that you are the most blessed of all creatures. Well, he said, that might be, but why are you so interested? Well, yeah, I just laying here imagining that if I could be way up there, I could see a large area of this wonderful world.
Washtankaga continues to flatter the buzzard until he asks a big favor. Could I have a ride? The buzzard refused, saying, No way can I get off the ground with you.
I said, why? He said, why, you're so big and heavy. I don't think I could even get off the ground, be airborne. You're quite a big person. Oh, well, he said, if that's what's bothering you, he said, I'll fix that in a jiffy. So Washtankaga thought to himself, he said, I should be just about the right size, that he can carry me, and then I can get this ride, and so forth. So, boom, it happened. Washtankaga had, just by his process of thinking, had reduced his size, his blanket, coonskin blanket, and his little box in the same proportion as his stature, down to a little tyke, like a little child. So he said, no, how's that? So, well, that's all right. He said, I'm going to sit on your back. He said, well, that's where I intend for you to be. Oh, he said, I'll hang out tight, too. So Washtankaga climbs on the bird's back, and the flight began.
The beautiful buzzard soared over the land, and Trickster was impressed. But the trickster forgot that he had humbly asked a favor of the buzzard, and became demanding and bossy. Take me here, he said. No, there. The buzzard, being haughty himself, did not appreciate his burden's bossiness, and nearly dropped the trickster in anger.
So he said, hey, you can quit that. He said, they almost dropped me that time. And so this gave the bird the idea that he was trying to find how to get rid of this burden. So he flew back over the woods, and he thought about a hollow tree that he used to see in a certain area, and he was gliding along looking for this hollow tree. And so the bird finally spotted this hollow tree and came along, gliding along over the treetops, and got there, and he quickly turned a flip and dumped Washtankaga down this hollow tree.
Since he was small, Washtankaga fell all the way to the bottom of the tree. You are an evil bird, Trickster shouted. You are haughty, and bad things befall those with too much pride. I am going to get even with you for this.
So I imagined the bird haw-hawed up his wing and flew away. But he did remember those last few words. I'm going to get even with you. Yeah, that's right. He said that. He could do that. He's quite a powerful being, but I just couldn't take his bossiness around any too much longer. So, oh well, I'll watch out for him. So this left Washtankaga down in this hollow tree. How am I going to get out of here? He began to think like a man now in trouble. So immediately he regained his right stature, and his box was the same proportion it was before, and his blanket was a large raccoon hide once more. And he's trying to figure out how he's going to get out of there when he heard sound like some voices somewhere. And he listened, and they were women talking the Winnebago tongue. And they said, I think we almost got enough dry wood now to last quite a while. Now we'll get some more over here, and then we'll go home. we'll knock it off for today. So, as they came closer to the tree, talking amongst themselves, why, Wakachunkaga had said, there's an answer to my problem. So, in a great big voice, he started to sing. In this hollow tree, there is a great big wakeduk.
Wakiduck means mother raccoon. Raccoons, being members of the bear family, were good to eat, and a large one would feed many. As Washtunkaga repeated his song, the women began chopping the tree.
Oh, well, let's get busy here. So they took their axes and began to chop a hole in the side of that hollow tree. And when they did cut a hole through there, why, he held his raccoon skin up there against the hole. And he cautioned that they shouldn't cut him at all, or cut her, because she was big, and chop the hole bigger so he can get me out.
The women cut nearly half the tree and were surprised when the trickster jumped out laughing at them instead of a big raccoon. They were furious and beat him diligently with their clubs and brooms. Trickster continued his adventure, but always remembered the proud bird who dumped him in the tree. He devised several plans to get revenge on the buzzard, but discarded all of them, until seeing a herd of buffalo gave him an idea.
Aha, he said, I think this is where I might be able to work something out. So he joined the buffalo herd and changed himself into a great big buffalo. And so this is what was going on. That the same time, the beautiful bird was always on the lookout. He'd been up there, up in the sky, looking down. He'd wonder, I wonder where Wakachunkaga is now. I know he got out of that tree because I see the big hole chopped in it. I don't know what he did to get out of there, but he's out someplace. And right this minute, he's probably planning some kind of devilment to do something to me, get even with me for dumping him in that hollow tree.
Unknown to the buzzard, Trickster's plan was unfolding perfectly. He had become an old bull buffalo, quite a large one. After eating grass for some time and fattening up, Washtunkaga, the buffalo, pretended to die. The word spread quickly among the carnivorous, meat-eating birds that a fat old buffalo was dead in the clearing to provide many tasty meals.
Lo and behold, all the meat-eating birds are those that like meat or tallow or something like that. They all flew out there to observe what the find was, and boy, this was that big buffalo. Well, let's see if we can get to the fat. So in this buffalo, they didn't exactly like meat. And he was full of that big tallow, or that big fat. That's what they call a big fat. So this is what they were wanting. So everyone took his turn trying to peck a hole in this tough old buffalo, and they'd almost beat their brains out trying to knock a hole in his hide. So one of the birds who had been pecking away there says, well, we ought to get Mr. Sharpbill, the magpie, to do this job for us. So they flew out into the woods or over the hills and finally found Mr. Magpie and told him that we got a big animal out here and we can't get in there to get the fat out of him yet. It's too tough. So the magpie began by tapping here and there, trying to punch and peck a hole in this hide. And he says, oh, pshaw. He said, I'll do it my way. Not the way you guys would think I should do it, but I'll do it my way. The easiest way to enter this carcass and get to the fat is right under his tail. So the one with the sharp bill went back there and right under his tail was the anus of the buffalo. So he started pecking, and sure enough, it was a little more tender, pecking a hole there. And finally pecked a hole big enough so that they could get back in there and start pecking away at the fat that they found in that area. In the meantime, one of the high-flying birds happened to see Mr. Pretty Boy, Pretty Bird, the beautiful bird, and said, say, he said, how come you're not down there enjoying this big feed with us? Well, he said, I have to be careful of what I eat. So a very proud person, he wouldn't tell why. Well, he said, well, you're just letting a lot of this go to waste. Why don't you come on over and see us sometime? Enjoy a nice meal. Oh, I might, he said. So he left him alone, and the next day, why, here up in a big tree next to where this dead buffalo lay was this Mr. Beautiful Bird sitting up there. I wonder, it could be Wakachankaga. Nah, he'd been laying there too long. Wakachankaga wouldn't have patience like that, even if he did hate me. Nah, he's kind of weakening, see? So he's not too vigilant now, because he's seen this thing laying there this long now. The next day he flew a little bit closer, and all the little feathered friends down there said, come on down. Hey, we're getting right to that nice best part there. He said, we're just, you know, we like you, we respect you, and you're a high flyer, beautiful bird. Out of respect, we saved you the choicest part in there. So that kind of talk kind of got him, oh, well, I'll take a nip at that. So that's all it takes, just one nip to get in bad if someone's laying for you in this kind of a condition. So he reached way in there and he took a bite at that nice big fat, and then all of a sudden something closed around his neck. Lo and behold, the buffalo gets up. Oh, he said, I haven't ate for a long time, said the buffalo to the surprised feathered friends, and he began to go around eating grass, and went down to the brook, drank water, with this beautiful bird hanging out of the rear end. That must have been a terrible sight. But remember, that's a proud bird. You get too proud, you get your head in trouble sometimes. So this is what is happening. Watch that pride, it don't get you in bad. So the buffalo ate grass and drank water. Finally got his fill, and so he munched around some more grass and so forth. And in a day or so, why, he let go of the bird. As soon as the bird hit the ground, there he was. He had his head someplace where he shouldn't have had it, and There he said he was kind of groggy, and his head was kind of steamed up. The feathers was all wet, messed up, and he's kind of dizzy-like, so he's trying to get his balance sitting there, and all of a sudden the buffalo disappeared, and here stood Wakatankaga. Oh, Wakatankaga was telling him this and that, what a mean, evil spirit he had because of his pride, because of his arrogance, and so forth. I guess he just laid a big sermon down to this one-time beautiful bird. He didn't look so good right now. It was the sickest bird in all creation. Truly so, because he'd been here hung by the neck for several days where he shouldn't have had his head. Well, and pretty soon he dried off up there in the tree, and he thought, well, now that I'm out of his reach, I'll preen myself and I'll probably be praised again for my beautiful feathers and so forth. So he shook himself, and these dry feathers just start dropping off his head, his neck, as far as his head was inside the buffalo. That the feathers fell off, and he was bald. And so Wakatankaga again made fun of him this time. And after making jokes about the buzzard, he told him that this is the way his kind shall be from this day till the end of time. And that's why we call them turkey buzzards nowadays, because they don't have any feathers on their head.
We have learned humility is an important virtue in Winnebago culture. Why should man be humble? The answer lies in the Winnebago story of creation. Mauna, the earth maker, created all things. Man was the last, weakest, and because he had reason and free will, the most imperfect of all Mauna's creations. Mr. White explains in this segment that man is the most inferior creature because he has no specific purpose on earth and does not possess the strength of other creatures. Man needs self-discipline and help from the spirits to overcome his weak nature, for he is often confused and makes wrong decisions.
I'm taking you way back to the beginning of time when the earth, the world was new, so the story goes. When the earth maker, Mauna, had created the earth, all the animals, all the plants, and that which walks on two legs, he gave all creatures their duties. And every day, since that time, up to now, all animals do what they're supposed to do. Their life patterns are set. All the insects do what they're supposed to do. In the beginning, Mauna made it so that this is what they do, and they do it yet from that day to this day. Except that which walks on two legs. As he gazed down on his creation, he said, I had given all these chores to all the other creatures. This that walks on two legs is the lowest among my creation. They have nothing to do, but I gave them a mind. And so he called all these spirits together, or it might have been other creatures, space creatures or whatnot, his helpers, and he explained to them that he was giving to the two-leg walkers the plant, the herb we called tobacco. And so tobacco in the Indian life was very important, because when they would think about their station or status and realize that they are nothing without his help, they would take this plant and use it as a sacrifice, incense, and so forth, to get help. This plant was used in that fashion. Today we would call it some religious act, prayer, by offering tobacco. Now, Mauna, the creator of earth and all that in there that is, explained to all the spirits that they could not take this plant, and it was the burning of which was very pleasing to all of them, and they all wanted that. And he explained that if they would accept the offering of tobacco, that they must answer the prayer of the one who was sacrificing this plant or portion of it to get some help from these different spirits. So this is the manner in which Mauna spoke to his helpers. And it is said that from that day to this day, the spirits still want the tobacco, but they can't take it away from those that walk on two legs. And Mauna himself would not break his word because he gave it to him. He himself, being all-powerful, all-knowing, still remembers this, and he does not take it away from them.